All true, every word. Every word. Good evening. Good evening. I'm Ellen Doré Watson. Welcome to another evening of Poetry at Smith, another jam-packed installment of Poetry at Smith. A little note about the next and last reading of the semester. Two spoken word poets, Suheir Hamad, author of Born Palestinian, Born Black, and Carl Hancock Rux, author of Pagan Operetta, who was selected by the New York Times Magazine as one of 30 artists under 30 most likely to influence culture over the next 30 years. The two of them will be reading on December 7th, which is another Tuesday, in Davis Ballroom. And we hope you will come. And we all know why we're here tonight. To hear Jack Gilbert. Born in Pittsburgh, educated there and in San Francisco, Jack Gilbert lives on the move, but slowly, paying careful attention to wherever he happens to be. In 1975, he was a chief lecturer on American literature for the U.S. State Department, lecturing in 15 countries. With sometimes extended intervals in New York City, San Francisco, Northampton, and Japan, he has spent much of his adult life on Greek islands, managing a scraped existence where the world is announced by the smell of oregano and sage in rocky places high up. He lives in Searching for Pittsburgh, where his tomatoes grow, in this happy place my serious heart has made. This year we are lucky and happy to have him here at Smith as the Grace Hazard Conkling Writer in Residence. Sometimes we have co-sponsors for the Poetry Center events, and we thank them. And while that's not exactly the case tonight, the Poetry Center would like to thank the Department of English Languages and Literature for bringing Jack to Smith and making it possible for him to be here tonight. Jack Gilbert's first volume of poems, Views of Jeopardy, received the Yale Younger Poets Award in 1962 and was nominated for the Pulitzer Prize. The nomination of a young poet's first book for the Pulitzer is remarkable enough, but consider that in 1962, one of the other nominated books was by Robert Frost, after a silence of 12 years, and the other was by William Carlos Williams, who had just died and who won. Monolithos, Poems 1962 and 1982, also nominated for a Pulitzer, was awarded the Stanley Kunitz Prize and the American Poetry Review Prize. In a review of Monolithos, poet David St. John praised the author for the stoniest and most aesthetic romanticism in American poetry. Jack Gilbert's work has appeared in many anthologies and in such journals as The New Yorker, the American Poetry Review, the Kenyon Review, and he is recipient of Guggenheim and NEA fellowships. He is also the author of Kochan, a collection of elegies in a limited edition. The Great Fires, Poems 1982 to 1992, stays true to the sparse, concrete style that has always distinguished Jack Gilbert's work. The poems are audacious, harsh, honest, heartbreakingly tender, and wise. Deep of thought, spare of word, he achieves what Kenneth Rexroth described as authentic poetic utterance. That said, I don't know what possessed me, because certainly Jack Gilbert is as about the most un-Amazon.com poet alive, but a couple months ago I looked up the customer comments on The Great Fires. I expected fervent praise, even reverence, but the form that it took made me feel a little better that day about the internet. From Austin, Texas, buy this book, read it closely, the poems will make you strong. From Kalkaska, Michigan, this book does what all others fail to do. It makes us live. As Dudley Fitz said, Jack Gilbert is a mind with a restless distaste for intermission. His poems don't ask us to like him. They demand that we pay attention to the world and our way of being in it. They urge us to be alive in new and genuine and questioning ways. Much has been said about how Jack's real nouns impart felt knowing, and this is true. I would lift the verbs from the poem Tear It Down and apply them to his way of feeling and knowing poetry, as well as love, the subject of the poem. Tear down, dismantle, break through, redefine, insist, get beyond, unlearn. Jack's work is as much about how we know as what we know. And it is not concerned with embellishing these thoughts, but with stating them with precision and clarity. Declaring himself against ornament, Jack Gilbert wrote, "Even my love poems are likely to be a perception about love or marriage, or trying to distinguish between two aspects of the heart which seem the same, or working to register a particular tonality of the spirit. Gorgeousness of language is likely to distract from that kind of attention." But there is gorgeous and there is gorgeous. The beauty in these poems comes from their rigorous compression, from their very strictness. We go to them not for florid sunsets, but for just the right stone, the hard, striated thought we have been needing to turn over in our hands, our hearts. Muriel Rukeyser said that Jack Gilbert's poems had moved her and called them abrupt, Etruscan, illuminated. Abrupt, yes, illuminated, surely, and yes, Etruscan, if we take it to mean of unknown linguistic affiliation. A poet who is altogether himself, for which we give thanks. Please welcome Jack Gilbert.
What a handsome introduction. The oxen have voices, the flowers are wounds, but you never escape from Tuscany noons. They cripple with beauty and butcher with love, sing folly, sing flee, sing going down. The moon is corroding, the deer have gone lame, and you never escape the incurably sane, uncrippled by beauty, unbutchered by love. Sing folly, flee, sing going down. Now it rains in your bowels, it rains though you weep with terrible tameness. It rains in your sleep and cripples with beauty and butchers with love. You never recover, you never escape, and you mustn't endeavor to find the mistake that cripples with beauty, that butchers with love. Sing folly, sing flee, sing going down. Sing maidens and towns. Ah, maidens and towns, folly, flee, sing going down. The abnormal is not courage. This is from a true historical account. The abnormal is not courage. The Poles rode out from Warsaw against the German tanks on horses, rode knowing in sunlight with sabers, a magnitude of beauty that allows me no peace. And yet this poem would lessen that day, question the bravery, say it's not courage, call it a passion, would say courage isn't that, not at its best. It was impossible, and with form. They rode in sunlight, were mangled. But I say courage is not the abnormal, not the marvelous act, not Macbeth with fine speeches. The worthless can manage in public or for the moment. It's too near the whore's heart, the bounty of impulse, and the failure to sustain even small kindness. Not the marvelous act, but the evident conclusion of being. Not strangeness, but a leap forward of the same quality, accomplishment, the even loyalty, but fresh. Not the prodigal son nor Faustus, but Penelope, the thing steady and clear. Then the crescendo, the real form, the culmination, and the exceeding. Not the surprise, the amazed understanding. The marriage, not the month's rapture, not the exception. The beauty that is of many days, steady and clear. It is the normal excellence of long accomplishment. Most of you probably know that in the 18th century, the poets would write a poem for the beginning of their book they called a blazon, which would more or less tell you what the poems were going to be, the overall subject of the book. And this is my blazon. It's called Going Wrong. The fish are dreadful. They're brought up the mountain in the dawn, most days, beautiful and alien and cold from night under the sea, the grand rooms fading from their flat eyes. Soft machinery of the dark, the man thinks, washing them. What can you know of my machinery? Demands the Lord. Sure, the man says quietly and cuts into them, laying back the dozen struts, getting to the muck of something terrible. The Lord insists. You are the one who chooses to live this way. I build cities where things are human. I make Tuscany, and you go to live with rock and silence. The man washes away the blood and arranges the fish on a big plate, starts the onions in the hot olive oil and puts in peppers. You have lived all year without women. He takes out everything and puts in the fish. No one knows where you are. People forget you. You are vain and stubborn. The man slices tomatoes and lemons, takes out the fish and scrambles eggs. I am not stubborn, he thinks, laying all of it on the table in the courtyard, full of early sun, shadows of swallows flying on the food. Not stubborn, just greedy. Of course, language is the heart blood and the blood of the heart. This is a poem about the evasiveness of language, its real nature, how it can function, how it can mean. And there's a reference in it, all of you, because you're friends of Smith and are highly educated, will know that in the 19th century they came across mounds of Sumerian ceramic records. And they were enormously happy because it was a section of history that we have almost no knowledge of. And here was all this plenty. But they couldn't read them. And when finally they translated them, they turned out to be records of commerce. This is called the forgotten dialect of the heart. How astonishing it is that language can almost mean, and frightening that it does not quite. Love, we say. God, we say. Rome and Michiko, we write, and the words get it wrong. We say bread, and it means according to which nation. French has no word for home, and we have no word for strict pleasure. A people in northern India is dying out because their ancient tongue has no words for endearment. I dream of lost vocabularies that might express some of what we no longer can express. Maybe the Etruscan texts would finally explain why the couples on their tombs are smiling. And maybe not. When the thousands of mysterious Sumerian tablets were translated, they seemed to be business records. But what if they are poems or psalms? My joy is the same as 12 Ethiopian goats standing silent in the morning light. O Lord, thou art slabs of salt and ingots of copper, as grand as ripe barley lithe under the wind's labor. Her breasts are 6 white oxen loaded with bolts of long-fibered Egyptian cotton. My love is 100 pitchers of honey. Shiploads of thuya are what my body wants to say to your body. Giraffes are this desire in the dark. Perhaps the spiral Minoan script is not a language, but a map. What we feel most has no name, but amber, archers, cinnamon, horses, and birds. It's a poem called Lovers. When I hear men boast of how passionate they are, I always think of 2 cleaning ladies at an upstairs window looking down at a man who is coming back from a party where they had lots of free beer. He's running in and out of buildings trying to find a toilet. My Lord, the taller woman says, that man down there sure does love architecture. I was married for 11 years to a Japanese woman named Michiko Nogami. This is a poem about her. We were living on a mountain at an old ruined villa in Greece, finding something. I say moon is horses in the tempered dark, because horse is the closest I can get to it. I sit on the terrace of this worn villa the king's telegrapher built on the mountain that looks down on blue sea and the small white ferry that crosses slowly to the next island each noon. Michiko is dying in the house behind me. The long windows open so I can hear the faint sound she will make when she wants watermelon to suck, or so I can take her to a bucket in the corner of the high-ceilinged room, which is the best we can do for a chamber pot. She will lean against my leg as she sits so as not to fall over in her weakness. How strange and fine to get so near to it. The arches of her feet are like voices of children calling in the grove of lemon trees, where my heart is as helpless as crushed birds. Married. I came back from the funeral and crawled around the apartment, crying hard, searching for my wife's hair. For 2 months, got them from the drain, from the vacuum cleaner, under the refrigerator, and off the clothes in the closet. But after other Japanese women came, there was no way to be sure which were hers, and I stopped. A year later, repotting Michiko's avocado, I find a long black hair tangled in the dirt. Searching for Pittsburgh, my hometown. The fox pushes softly, blindly through me at night, between the liver and the stomach, comes to the heart and hesitates, considers and then goes around it, trying to escape the mildness of our violent world. Goes deeper, searching for what remains of Pittsburgh in me. The rusting mills sprawling gigantically along 3 great rivers, the authority of them. The gritty alleys where we played every evening were stained pink by the inferno always surging in the sky, as though Christ and the Father were still fashioning the earth. Locomotives driving through the cold rain, lordly and bestial in their strength. Massive water flowing morning and night throughout a city girded with 90 massive water flowing, and right through this massive flowers flowing morning and night throughout a city girded with 90 bridges, sumptuous-shouldered, sleek-thighed, obstinate and majestic, unquenchable. All grip and flood, mighty sucking and deep-rooted grace, a city of brick and tired wood, ox and sovereign spirit, primitive Pittsburgh, winter, month after month, telling of death, the beauty forcing us as much as harshness, our spirits forged in that wilderness, our minds forged by the heart, making together a consequence of America. The fox watched me build my Pittsburgh again and again, in Paris afternoons on Butte-Chaumont, on Greek islands with their fields of stone, in bed with women, sometimes amid their gentleness. Now the fox will live in our ruined house. My tomatoes grow ripe among the weeds and the sound of water. In this happy place, my serious heart has made. One of the things Ellen said was my impulse to find middle tones. I'm not much interested in the difference between cherry red and lime green. And in that sense, I'm preoccupied with finding a language for love, or an understanding of love. Studies have shown that you can measure how much you know about a subject by the vocabulary you have for it. Like the famous example is the Eskimos have hundreds of words for ice and snow. For love, we have 5. This is a poem about infidelity. And I'm not for it, I'm not against it. I'm interested in it. There's a special quality. I don't mean just somebody kind of having occasional recreation visits to somebody's bed. I mean a real relationship, which is infidelity. This is titled, Trying to Have Something Left Over. There was a great tenderness to the sadness when I would go there. She knew how much I loved my wife and that we had no future. We were like casualties helping each other as we waited for the end. Now I wonder if we understood how happy those Danish afternoons were. Most of the time we did not talk. Often I took care of the baby while she did housework, changing him and making him laugh. I would say, Pittsburgh, softly each time before throwing him up. Whisper, Pittsburgh, with my mouth against the tiny ear and throw him higher. Pittsburgh and happiness high up. The only way to leave even the smallest trace, so that all his life her son would feel gladness unaccountably when anyone spoke of the ruined city of steel in America. Each time almost remembering something maybe important that got lost. Alone. I never thought that Michiko would come back after she died. But if she did, I knew it would be as a lady in a long white dress. It is strange that she has returned as somebody's Dalmatian. I meet the man walking her on a leash almost every week. He says good morning, and I stoop down to calm her. He said once that she was never like that with other people. Sometimes she is tethered on their lawn when I go by. If nobody is around, I sit on the grass. When she finally quiets, she puts her head in my lap and we watch each other's eyes as I whisper in her soft ears. She cares nothing about the mystery. She likes it best when I touch her head and tell her small things about my days and our friends. That makes her happy the way it always did. Between aging and old. Don't laugh, it's a great period. One that's unpopulated. Between aging and old. I wake up like a stray dog belonging to no one. Cold, cold in the rain. Friendships outgrown or ruined, and love. Dear God, the women I have loved, now only names remembered. Dead, lost, or old. Mildness, more and more the danger. Living among rocks and weeds to guard against wisdom. Alone with the heart howling and refusing to let it feed on mere affection. Lying in the dark, singing about the intractable kinds of happiness. Older women. You have to trust me on this one. Older women. It's a little short poem. Each farmer on the island conceals his hive far up on the mountain, knowing it will otherwise be plundered. When they die or can no longer make the hard climb, the lost combs, year after year, grow heavier with honey, and the sweetness has more and more acutely the taste of that wilderness. This is in Italy. In Umbria. Once upon a time, I was sitting outside the cafe watching twilight in Umbria when a girl came out of the bakery with the bread her mother wanted. She did not know what to do, already bewildered by being 13, and just that summer a woman. She now had to walk past the American. But she did fine. Went by and around the corner with style, not noticing me. Almost perfect. At the last instant, could not resist darting a look down at her new breasts. Often I go back to that dip of her head when people talk about this one or that one of the great beauties. I imagine the gods. I imagine the gods saying, "We will make it up to you. We will give you 3 wishes," they say. "Let me see the squirrels again," I tell them. "Let me eat some of the great hogs stuffed and roasted on the giant spit and put out steaming into the winter of my neighborhood when I was usually too broke to afford even the 100 grams I ate so happily walking up the cobbles, past the street of the moon, and the street of the birdcage makers, the street of silence, and the street of the little pissing. "We can give you wisdom," they say in their rich voices. "Let me go at last to Uget," I say, the Algerian student with her huge eyes, who timidly invited me to her room when I was too young and bewildered that first year in Paris. Let me at least fail at my life. Think, they say patiently, we could make you famous again. Let me fall in love one last time, I beg them. Teach me mortality. Frighten me into the present. Help me find the heft of these days, that the nights will be full enough and my heart feral. This takes place long ago, when I was very young, living in Paris for the first time. I lived up, Paris is, most of you know, it's flat, and there are two hills. There's the fashionable hill, and then there was the one I was on. And I lived in a mansarde, garret. Really classical. It was so narrow that I had a narrow single bed, and if I wanted to go by it to the window, I had to walk sideways. You know that the French are very proud of their bells. So that, for instance, they won't allow any other bells to play when Notre Dame is playing. So they've worked it out. And this poem is like a collapse of history, of reality and not reality, love and happiness and sadness of all different periods, or several different periods. It's called pewter because pewter is one of the 4 materials that expand as it cools, which is my idea of getting old. Pewter. Thrushes flying under the lake, nightingales singing underground. Yes, my king. Paris hungry and leisurely just after the war. Yes. America falling into history. Yes. Those silent winter afternoons along the Seine when I was always alone. Yes, my king, rain everywhere in the forests of Pennsylvania as the king's coach lumbered and was caught and all stood gathered close while the black trees went on and on. Ah, my king, it was the sweet time of our lives, the rain shining on their faces, the loud sound of rain around. Like the nights we waited, knowing she was probably warm and moaning under someone else. That cold mansarde looked out over the huge hospital of the poor and far down on Paris, gray and beautiful under the February rain. Between that and this, that yes and this yes, between, my king, that forgotten girl, forgotten pain and the consequence. Those lovely long ago night bells that I did not notice grow more and more apparent in me, like pewter expanding as it cools. Yes, like a king halted in the great forests of Pennsylvania, like me singing these prison songs, to praise the gray, to praise her, to tell of me, yes, and of you, my king. After 20 hours in bed with no food, I decided I better have at least tea. I'm living out in the fields. After 20 hours in bed with no food, I decided I better have at least tea. Got up to light the lamp, but the sweating and shivering started again, and I went backwards across the room, slammed against the stone wall, came to with blood on my head, and could not figure out which way the bed was. Crawled around feeling for the matches, but gave up, remembering there was one left in the box by the stove. It flared and went out. Exaggerata, I said, and groped back, feeling for the matches with barefoot geisha steps. Began to shake and moan, began to shake and moan the chattering way the hero did when his malaria returned. I smiled, but worried. No telephone and nobody going by out there in the fields I could call to. And God knows what I had. Realized I was on all fours. Interesting, something said as I dragged myself onto the bed. Interesting, the other part said. Oh, for Christ's sake. What the hell are you doing out there, he writes, in that worn rock valley with chickens and the donkey and not farming, and the people around you speaking Greek, and the only news faint on the Armed Forces Network? I don't know what to say. And what about women, he asks. Yes, I think to myself, what about women? There is always the harrowing by mortality, the strafing by age, he thinks. Always defeats. Sorrows come like epidemics, but we can still be alive in the difficult way adults want to be alive. It is worth having the heart broken, a blessing to hurt for 18 years because a woman is dead. He thinks of long ago, before that summer, the summer he was with Jana and her sister and in Puglia. Having outwitted the general, their father, and driven south to the estates of the Contessa, like an opera, the fiefdom stretching away to the horizon, houses of the peasants burrowed into the walls of the compound, a butler with white gloves serving chicken and aspic, the pretty maid in her uniform bringing his breakfast each morning on a silver tray, toast both light and dark, hot chocolate and tea, both, a world like Tosca, a feudal world crushed under the weight of passion without seeing. Jana's virgin body helplessly in love, the young man wild with romance and appetite, wondering whether he would ruin her by mistake. Novella. Him, she said, and him. They put us in the second car and followed her back to the villa, our fear slowly fading during the weeks. Everyone was kind but busy. We could go anywhere on the first floor and on the grounds this side of the fence. They decided on me and sent the other boy away. Before, I had only glimpsed her at the upper windows. Now we ate together at opposite ends of the table. Candlelight eased her age, but not her guilt. Once she said the world was an astonishing animal. Light was its spirit, and noise was its mind, that it was composed to feed on honor, but did not. Another time she warned me about walking on the lawns at night, told me of heavy birds that flew after dark, croaking feathers or lead, stone or fire, mounting people who gave the wrong answer and riding them like horses across the whole county, beating them with their narrow wings. No. Mounting people who gave the wrong answer and riding them like horses across the whole county, beating them with their powerful wings. We would play cards silently on rainy days and have sardine sandwiches at 4 a.m, taking turns reading aloud from Tolstoy. "What need do we have for consulates?" she said once, before going upstairs, the grand room beginning to fill with the dawn. "Why insist on nature? A flower must be red or white, but we can be anything. Our victories are difficult because the triumph is not in possessing excellence. It is found in reluctance." Month after month we lived like that, and with me telling her what it was like out there among the living. She was steadily failing, like a Palladian palace coming apart gracefully. The last morning she stood by the great windows. "I will not give you my blessing," she said, "and I refuse you also my reasons. Who are you? Who is anyone to make me just?" When they came for her, she smiled at me and said, "At last." This is from a Greek island I was on. Most of these are almost all of these are true stories, not that last one. This is politically incorrect. It's titled, "Put Her in the Fields for Kindness." The door was in the whitewashed 8-foot walls of the narrow back street common on Greek islands. Beautiful light and shade in the clear air. The big iron bolt was on the outside, locking something in. Some days the pounding inside made the heavy wooden door shudder. Often a voice screaming. "The crazy old woman," people said. "She hurt the children if they let her out, pinched them or scared them," they said. Sometimes everything was still and I would delay until I heard the tiny whimper that meant she knew I was there. Late one afternoon, on my way for oil, the door was broken. She was in the lot opposite, in weeds by the wall, her dress pulled up, pissing like a cow, unable to manage, and quiet in the last light. Two girls barefoot walking in the rain. Both girls lovely. One of them is sane. Hurting me softly, hurting me though. Two girls barefoot walking in the snow. Walking in the white snow, walking in the black. Two girls barefoot, never coming back. That's enough. I'll sing you a song and stop. A little song. You don't have to worry. No, it won't. It's called solitude. And she said, you must talk no more about ecstasy. It is a loneliness. The woman wandered about picking up her shoes and silks. You said you loved me, the man said. We tell lies, she said, brushing her beautiful hair, naked except for the jewelry. We try to believe. You were hopeless with joy, he said, moaning and weeping. In the dream, we pretend to ourselves that we are touching. The heart lies to the heart because it must. It's lucky that this is Smith, and I don't have to explain to you who Icarus was. You know, in other schools I'd have to say this was the son of the magician that was on the island who perfected the apparatus that helped them escape, and the boy was too vain and flew close to the sun, but I don't have to do that for you. Failing and flying. Everyone forgets that Icarus also flew. Like when they say, love comes to an end, or the magic. Everyone forgets that Icarus also flew. Like when love comes to an end, or the marriage fails, and people say they knew it was a mistake, that everybody said it would never work, that she was old enough to know better. But I say anything really worth doing is worth doing badly. Being there with Linda by the summer ocean on our deserted side of the island while love was fading out of her. The stars burning so extravagantly those nights that anyone could tell you they would never last. She was asleep in my bed every morning, like a visitation, the gentleness in her like deer standing in the dawn mist. I watched her every afternoon coming back through the hot, stony field after swimming, the sea light behind her and the giant sky on the other side of that. Listen to her while we ate lunch. How can they say that marriage failed? Like people who came back from Provence when it was what it used to be and said, it was pretty, but the food was greasy. I believe Icarus was not failing as he fell, but just coming to the end of his triumph. I'll read two more and sing my little song. The border inside us. Why the mouth? Why is it the mouth we put to mouth at the final moments? Why not the famous loins? Because the loins are far away. We know them and the fine pleasure at a remove. The mouth is close up against the soul. We couple desperately all night after setting out We couple desperately all night before setting out for long years in prison. But that is the body's goodbye. We kiss the person we love last thing before one coffin is shut, because that is our being touching something unknown. Thank you. We kiss the person we love last thing before one coffin is shut, because that is our being touching something unknown. Men shake hands before one goes up on the high war. Men shake hands before one goes up on the high wire to work without a net. A kiss is the frontier inside us, where the courting becomes the courtship, where the dancing ends and the dance begins. The mouth is our chief access to real intimacy, the porch to the brain in which she may reside. Her mouth is the forecourt of the heart, the way to the spirit enthroned, where we meet momentarily among the orders, amid the dominions and the powers. This is the last poem before my little song. The manger of incidentals. We are surrounded by the absurd excess of the universe, by meaningless bulk, vastness without size, power without consequence, the stubborn iteration that is present without being felt. Nothing the spirit can marry, merely phenomenon and its physics, an endless of going on. No habitat where the brain can recognize itself, no pertinence for the heart, helpless duplication, the horror of none of it being alive. No red squirrels, no flowers, not even weeds, nothing that knows what season it is. The stars uninflected by awareness, meaning without implication. We alone see the iris in front of the cabin reach its perfection and quickly perish. The lamb is born into happiness and is eaten for Easter. We are blessed with powerful love and it goes away. But we can mourn. We live the strangeness of being momentary and yet and still. We are exalted by being temporary, the grand Italy of meanwhile. It is the fact of being brief, being small and slight that is the source of our beauty. We are a singularity that makes music out of noise because we must hurry. We make a harvest of loneliness and desiring in the black. We make a harvest of loneliness and desiring in the blank wasteland of the cosmos. Now for the famous poem. It's very short. It's called Almost Happy. The goldfish is dead this morning on the bottom of her world. The autumn sky is white. The trees are coming apart in the cold rain. Loneliness gets closer and closer. He drinks hot tea and sings off key. This train ain't a going home train, this train. This is not a going home train, this train. This train ain't a going home train, 'cause my home's on a gone away train. That train. Don't go on. Because if you do, I'll sing another song.
Thank you. Books by Bruce Macmillan. Please stay and get them signed.